I was like, hey, I'm a little kid from Virginia, just never seen someone drop $5 million to have a place to write. And Dean said this to me, which was really interesting. He said, there's a room there where in the morning the light comes in over the pool. And in that room, we never think about budgets, cast availabilities, studio notes. We just write the movie that we would like to see. Now they went down there, came back 6 weeks later with the script that became the third highest grossing movie in film history, right? It worked for them.
Welcome back to another episode of the Limitless podcast. Today we have with us Stephen Puri as our guest. He's the founder of the Sukha company, and he will talk about techniques of healthy high performance from film and TV. Stephen, a warm welcome to you. How are you?
It is wonderful to be here. For those who are listening, playing along in their cars or at home or at the gym, I think the thing we'll try and do is create an entertaining and actionable episode. And of the many hundreds of episodes you've done, I think the thing that might be unique about this is I'm the only person who has been a senior executive at a couple of motion picture studios, as well as raised over 20 million of venture and run a couple of tech companies, one successful exit, two failures. So a lot of what I talk about now is based upon that experience. So hope it's helpful.
Yeah, and I was just sharing before we jumped on the show also, Stephen, that I think the time is now. This is the year of video, and people are setting up podcast studios in their homes all over the world. So I couldn't think of a better person to have on the show right now, Stephen.
Here we go. Glad to be here. Where should we begin?
Yeah, please share us a little bit about you. What is it that we should know about Stephen?
Well, I think the things I'll share are based in this experience that I have, which is I started as an engineer. My parents were both engineers at IBM. And, when you're little, if your parents are great tennis players, you probably learned to play tennis when you were little, right? So I learned to code. Even though when I went to college at the University of Southern California, I was not technically a CS major, but I was a Thomas Watson scholar from IBM. So I had a job at IBM as a junior software engineer to make money for college whenever I wanted. So I kind of pursued my studies, which were more in broadcasting. It has a great cinema TV school there. And on the side, worked as a software engineer. I happened to be in Los Angeles at USC when film became digital. And I was a good person to bridge those two because I spoke engineer and I also spoke creative. So I produced the digital parts of a number of movies, from Independence Day to True Lies to Seven to Braveheart to, blah, blah, blah. And it was a great way to meet a lot of directors. And then it made me interested in going all the way into film, like leaving the digital part behind and saying, how could I help get films made? I worked my way up that ladder. As you know, I was an executive vice president at DreamWorks for Kurtzman Orsi. I was a vice president at Fox. So at that time, the Die Hard franchise, the Wolverine franchise, some stuff like that. And then hit a point where I was like, wow, every movie that I'm working on is basically a sequel or a prequel or a remake. And I was not super inspired. I didn't want to wake up, be 40, 50 years old, and be like, hey, kids, daddy's going to go make Die Hard 19, pay for your college. And I got back into engineering. It was the other thing I knew how to do. And I thought, what is it I've learned that has an engineering solution? What are problems that we can solve in that way? And that's a lot how I got into flow states and helping people do something in that deep, concentrated state. And that's what brings us to today, to being limitless.
Yes, fantastic story. Thank you for sharing that, Stephen. And, I've been reflecting a lot in early 2026. There's so much technology out there, so many changes, so much innovation. And, I'm about to turn 51 myself, and many of my people in my network are, 50 plus and a little bit scared of all the technology and so on, including myself, a bit uncomfortable, but I think we just have to engulf ourselves in it. So perhaps you can share, how can people successfully, for example, adjust to the influx of all these AI tools and agents then into the workplace, but also in their life?
That is a great question. Yeah, that's a great question. So let's first say this. A lot of people use AI right now as a term to mean large language models, LLMs, the ChatGPTs and the Anthropics and the Claudes and the Perplexities and all these models. So those models give the appearance of thought, but in reality, they are like Google autocomplete on steroids. Google autocomplete can say, oh, you know what, Nick, your next character you're going to type is probably S, and it'll suggest it. It's great. What's interesting about LLMs is they operate the same way for the next word, the next thought, the next paragraph. They're good at matching patterns probabilistically, right? So when people say AI, they're largely saying LLMs, and they're largely saying, oh, an engine that will predict based upon past patterns. That is absolutely going to wipe out a lot of jobs. If your job is a rote pattern matching kind of job, yes, and LLM will do that for a fraction of the cost all day and all night without turning off, right? So those are going to go away. Now, that can sound scary, but it also means that the kind of work that becomes prized is the work that is the deep work, the creativity that humans do that pattern matching LLMs don't do. And that is where a lot of the opportunity is. The same way like with engineering, where LLMs, coding assistants have had a huge effect very early on, right? It means that, yes, junior software engineers are having a hard time finding a job. But if you're a senior, like a systems architect or a senior engineer, and you can then command an LLM, a coding assistant, to do your bidding, it magnifies. It's like having 3 or 4 junior software engineers working for you at all times. So that kind of deep work to understand, okay, how could this be created? How should we structure this? That becomes very valuable. So that is my answer to you, which we obviously are all having the same conversation about, which is, does this just wipe out white collar jobs? Well, no, it means that the kind of job you really want is one where you are doing the deep work that LMs can't do.
I like that. And I completely agree with you. It means that we can do more human, do more meaningful, do more creative and innovative work, and perhaps have some more balanced time as well to do what we love to do in our lives. So I like your take on that.
Right.
Yeah. And Stephen, then let's learn from you, from film and TV. Perhaps you can share some productivity techniques that the top screenwriters use.
Okay, so to set everyone's brains, in sync about this, I have been very fortunate that in my film career, I worked with some of the top screenwriters that write action movies, right? So when I was at DreamWorks with Alex Kurtz and Bob Orsi, like Alex and Bob, the guys who were Transformers 1 and 2, Star Trek 11, Zorro, The Island, Mission Impossible 3, that sort of thing. Worked with, Billy Ray, with David Ayer, with, David Lindelof, Carlton Cuse, like a lot of these guys that are at the top of their form. And I say guys because they're mainly males that write those big action movies. Maybe Lita and 1 or 2 others that write them, but it's mainly guys. And the best ones have a way of doing it that's sustainable. Like, yes, they're making $1-2 million a script, right? But they're able to do multiple scripts a year and do it year after year because they've learned how their brain works, right? They've learned how to do it sustainably. And I'll mention there are many tips and tricks, but let me mention a couple of them to get our conversation going. When I was young in the film industry, there was a screenwriter, well-known, Ron Bass, My Best Friend's Wedding, Rain Man, bunch of stuff. He wrote movie star kind of roles. And he was famous, maybe infamous, for not talking to his family in the morning. Not like a good morning, who wants pancakes, who needs a ride to school, would not talk to them in the morning, 5 until 9 or 10 in the morning. And he said to them, listen, when I start talking to you, I can't hear my characters' voices in my head anymore. And I need that time to be able to write dialogue. Now, keep in mind, he writes the kind of dialogue that first dollar gross movie stars say yes to. That is a very hard bar to be the one script that Julia Roberts, Tom Cruise, Dustin Hoffman says, I will spend my spring saying these words, right? So he's very aware of what's called his chronotype, which is the concept that you're more adept at certain times of day to do certain kinds of things, right? So in his understanding of himself, he said, I've done this enough to know in the morning I must write dialogue. This is when I can do this. Later in the day, in the afternoon, he could do collaborations with other writers, studio notes meetings, talk to his agent, things like that. And he set his day up in that way that respected his natural rhythms, right? So that's chronotype. Now, there's another interesting technique that I saw as I was coming up, and I saw it a couple times, which is the way some of these writers would use mental space and physical space and trigger to get into a mental space by where they were. The first time I saw this, I was actually not producing. I was doing digital effects. I had met Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin, who'd done Stargate and Universal Soldier, and then going out to do Independence Day. And as I learned, they wrote their scripts at this villa in Puerto Vallarta, some beautiful white marble in the hills of Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, right? And so when they had to write the next thing, Roland told his assistant, Joey, go rent the villa for the next month or two. Joey came back. It was rented already. It was vacation rental. It was like an Airbnb before Airbnb, right? She's like, someone has it rented. It was so meaningful to Roland and Dean. Roland called his entertainment attorney, this guy, John Deemers, fantastic attorney, and said, John, buy the villa. By Monday, Roland owned that villa. Now, the renters who were there, I'm sure they were paid nicely to find another villa in Puerto Vallarta, but Roland dropped $5 million to have this house. And I was talking to Dean. I was like, hey, I'm a little kid from Virginia, just never seen someone drop $5 million to have a place to write. And Dean said this to me, which was really interesting. He said, there's a room there where in the morning the light comes in over the pool. And in that room, we never think about budgets, cast availabilities, studio notes. We just write the movie that we would like to see. And I was like, oh, okay. It's very interesting. They were that aware of that space, triggered that for them. Now they went down there, came back 6 weeks later with the script that became the third highest grossing movie in film history, right? It worked for them. But it's not to say you need a $5 million villa, because I'll tell you, years later, when I was involved in development and production, I was with, Alex and Bob at DreamWorks. Now they're also $1.5, $2 million script writers. When they got in a crunch, our offices, the Amblin offices are on the Universal Studios lot in Hollywood. Right across the street is a Universal Hilton. It's not a glamorous property. It's a fine place to stay with your kids the night before you go on the rides, right? But they would have their assistant rent a room for a couple of weeks across the street at this Universal Hilton. And I thought to myself, they're pulling down a couple $1 million a script a couple times a year. They could easily, they could go to Bora Bora and go write. Why this hotel? And it hit me. They had met back in school. And I think for them, the mental trigger was Kurtzman on the edge of the bed with his MacBook out, Bob at the desk with his MacBook out, talking about what should happen next. And it evoked dorm room. It evoked, we're these scrappy writers who have to prove to everyone that we can do this. And then in 2 weeks, they would finish Transformers 2, or they'd finish Star Trek, right? And you can do that. Like as if you are working and you start being conscious of, even if you're remote and you have the ability to say, I can work in a coffee shop, I can work in my living room, I can work at my kitchen table, I can work in my office. If you start to become more conscious of that and say, you know what, when I do this kind of work, I'm always going to do it in this place. You'll notice that as you enter that place, your mind starts to fall in and say, oh, right, this is where I write my blog. Oh, this is where I code. And it benefits you. So 2 ideas, I don't want to belabor the point, but Chronotype and also mental physical space were interesting techniques I saw from like some of the top screenwriters in Hollywood.
Truly, truly inspirational indeed, Stephen. And I love that. And it's about finding our space where we are comfortable, and it's different for everyone. And I know that if you're looking back at Ian Fleming, who wrote the James Bond movies, I think he spent a lot of time at different places. He called it the Golden Eye and places like that in Jamaica, if I remember right.
Yes.
And then I know also authors like Robin Sharma. He talked a lot about Mauritius. And as I read his book, The 5 a.m. Club, I was thinking, where can I write my second book? Because I'm writing it now, at least to get the right creativity. And for me, it was an easy win because I do a lot of work in the Maldives. So I did an extended stay for 12 days. And my zone was to walk barefoot in the morning, circulating the island as the sunrise. And I was basically doing voice notes to myself when I got the ideas. I was going deep inside myself, and those formed the skeletons for my next upcoming book about holistic leadership, which is just this, Stephen, about how do we balance our life and get the best ideas mentally.
I love that.
And Stephen, with that then, any tips from you how leaders can create this condition for high performing to thrive, and both for themselves and also for their teams?
Well, it's interesting. I'm glad you asked that. I'll tell you, one of the things I'm very passionate about is when I discovered flow states, I was astonished that I had not heard about that or experienced that earlier. Like, I wish in my 20s I'd experienced a flow state, because then I would have dug in to say, what was this? How do I recreate it? Right? Now, I know there's a portion of the Limitless audience that they're flow masters and they know everything about flow states and they live in a flow state, right? And there's probably another cohort that has heard about it because flow states, the concept is becoming popular. But let me just take a moment to explain what it is so everyone's on the same footing. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Okay. So there was a Hungarian-American psychologist, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and he had a thesis. He said, if you talk to high performers in different disciplines, athletes, artists, scientists, inventors, and you talk to them about the highly concentrated states they go into when they do the thing that makes them famous, the thing that we know them for, they talk about those states in remarkably similar ways. Why is that? So he did his interviews, he did his research, and at the end of it wrote a book called Flow. It is the seminal work on this. It's from whence we get the term flow state. And he said the greatest thing. He said, I chose this word flow because it was the most beautiful metaphor for what I found. We are all on the river, paddling to move ourselves forward. But if we align our boats with the current, it carries us, it magnifies our efforts. We go further and faster. He said that is what these high performers have figured out how to do, and how to do repeatably. And that was a fascinating, my first experience. I had never heard the term flow state before. I was on a flight with no Wi-Fi. I had to do some designs in Figma. And I remember thinking, oh, the plane's landing. We just took off. And I looked down, and over 2 hours and 40 minutes had gone by. I had no concept of the time. I didn't know if the drink cart had come by. I hadn't chatted with my seatmate. And because there's no Wi-Fi, I hadn't been bugged with my phone or WhatsApps or watching a YouTube video or hearing the news. Like, it was this protected little bubble. And the designs I was working on, they were done. And I liked them. And I felt a feeling of being ahead of my day instead of behind my day. When I landed, I didn't have to race to the hotel to finish the designs for the meeting the next day. I actually went to dinner with a buddy of mine in SF because I had a free night that I didn't plan on. And that is the foundation for what I want to answer your question with, which is, if as a leader, you recognize that billion-dollar companies do not win because everyone comes to the stand-up. They're like, well, Nick, this is what I did yesterday. This is what I'm doing today. I'm not blocked. Okay, on to you, Steven. They don't win because someone's like, I returned all my Slack messages. You know what I mean? No billion-dollar company comes from that. Billion-dollar companies come from, we go to the staff meeting and Nick goes, actually, like for 2 hours yesterday, I stared at the window and I thought deeply about what our competitor launched recently. And you know what we should do? We should do this. And everyone in the meeting goes, oh my God, we should leave the meeting right now and start building that. That's how companies win. So that means if you as a leader want to have a company where people are doing deep work, you need to create the conditions where they can. So number one, if you want people to be in a flow state and like do as Cal Newport would say, the deep things, that takes a few minutes to get in. Like, you don't sit down and go, I'm in flow, I'm doing deep work right now, right? It takes 15 to 23 minutes, the research shows. So if you get interrupted, it takes you another 15 to 23 to get back in. So if you as a leader say, hey, you know what? I recognize that for you to do something meaningful, you need like an hour or two of uninterrupted time. Why don't we block that out? Why don't we do an experiment and say, hey, you know what? Tuesday, Thursday, let's not set client meetings or internal meetings from 9 to 10 or 9 to 11. You can talk to everyone about their chronotype, right? What time of day should this be? And in that time, let's see what comes of it after a week or two. And maybe someone comes to the staff meeting and goes, actually, I have an idea that changes the course of our company. Or maybe in 2 weeks, no one's had that great idea, but you created the condition where people feel secure to say, I'm going to go and think deeply, not I made sure my TPS reports were all turned in so I get my paycheck, because you don't wait for that.
Yeah. And again here, Stephen, we are fully aligned, you and I, as an entrepreneur these days, I say when I'm on my computer, when I'm doing emails and when I'm in meetings, I'm the administrator of my business or the manager at the most. But being the CEO or the strategist for my business is when I'm out for a bike ride in the forest. That's when the big idea comes. So when I come back
Completely
and have my coffee
agreed.
after. Yeah.
Do you want to know? There's actually some great neuroscience behind that. And I'll tell you a funny thing. When I was a senior at USC, my first job in film and entertainment was I was working at a company that made the trailers and music videos and commercials for movies. So my exact job was we would get in rough cuts of movies from Warner Brothers, Sony, MGM. And I would then choose a writer-producer to watch that rough cut and start to write a trailer, right? So it'd be like, hey, Nick, we got this Will Ferrell comedy in from Sony. You did a great job last year with that summer comedy. Why don't you look at this and write that, right? Okay. Now, the company is owned by two guys who are very well respected as promo guys, as ad men in Hollywood, right? One of them, his name is Jeff. Always to this day, he's still a friend, calls me Stevie. He's the only person in life who calls me Stevie. Just for the purpose of the story, he calls me Stevie, okay? So I'm sitting there like 20 years old, and Jeff comes to my office. He goes, hey, Stevie. I was like, yes, Jeff. You know Bart? And I think to myself, there's a guy in the vault, who like delivers tapes. I was like, yeah, I think I met Bart, yeah. He goes, you ever give Bart a movie to write a trailer? Are we talking about Bart who gets coffee and and picks up tapes in his car? Are we talking about the same Bart? He goes, yeah. I have an instinct about him, Stevie. Jeff, you've been doing this for 20 years, and I just started. Who am I to say anything? But yes, I was like, let me find something for him. We'll give him a shot, right? So I found like a Warner Brothers B title that had like a month deadline. So if he came back after a week and hated it, like I could give it to a pro who'd knock it out, right? So Jeff comes to my office 2 days later. He goes, hey, Stevie, how's Bart doing? I was like, I just gave him this movie 2 days ago. I don't want to stress him out. I was going to ask him on Monday. Let him have the weekend. Bart goes, Jeff goes, okay, yeah. That's fair. Okay, what else did you give him? Jeff, he's never written a trailer before in his life. I'm not going to give him 2 movies and have him blow his brains out. And he goes, Stevie. And he said something that to this day I've seen proven so many times to be correct. He says, Stevie, let me explain to you how creativity works. It's always about the other thing. He goes, if you give Bart one movie to watch on that trailer, he's going to sit there with little beads of sweat going down his temples, and he's going to write the most obvious B version of that trailer. You have to give him something else to work on, because it's when his brain thinks it's busy over here that the part of your brain that does the cool stuff goes, oh, I don't know. What about chocolate and peanut butter? What if those were combined? He's like, trust me on this. Can I tell you, number one, Bart is now a writer-producer at Fox, has a huge career as a promo guy. Jeff spotted him and was right. I have seen Jeff proven right so many times about this thing of, I was out biking, I was walking, I was doing the dishes, I was showering, I was driving, And there's a book on the neuroscience of it called The Net and the Butterfly that talks about your default mood network, which is almost like, the young child that's always looking around being like, phone, microphone. And then later the executive mode network that is more the adult. It's like, you know what? Homework's due tomorrow morning at 9. I have to finish it tonight. Oh, I have to drive the kids to school, and executes action, right? And it's only when the executive mode network is busy. Oh, I have to drive the car. I have to ride the bike and not hit anything. No. That the default mode network, like the child, is like, oh, okay, I'm free to do cool things. And that's why when you're doing the dishes, riding your bike, driving the car, you're like, I have a great idea, even though you didn't think you were thinking about that. Yeah. Anyway, back to you in the studio, Nick.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that inspirational story, Stephen. I think many of the listeners can see themselves in that, and hopefully they can get some more white space in their life and their time so they can come up with those bigger ideas. And that leads me then to the next question. I personally love to work remotely. Being an entrepreneur, having that freedom is really what works for me. I'm a social distant, introverted Swede, so sitting in a coffee shop where it's loud doesn't really work for me. I do great work.
But here you are hosting a podcast. So
yeah.
you're making progress.
Thank you, Stephen. But for everyone who's listening here, and where do you see the trend? Is remote work over? Was it just during the pandemic? And where is it pending now? And what can we expect that lies ahead?
Well, you are correct in that there was a pendulum that swung really far to remote when we all couldn't be together unless we'd kill each other for health reasons, right? Pendulum is swinging back the other way. Now, there are a number of things happening. For example, having the pressure to be back in the office is a great way to lay people off without laying them off, right? The same way a lot of the earnings calls, CEOs and CFOs are saying, oh, thanks to AI, we're going to reduce our force by 3%, So these are great ways to boost shareholder value, to downsize your corporation, reduce your expenses. And taking away remote from people is one way to do that, right? So for top talent, like if you don't want to lose this person, period, sometimes those policies become more flexible, because top talent knows they have the leverage to say, I am one of the best designers, writers, engineers, and I live now in wherever with my family. So if you don't want me, I have 5 other offers, right? So you have leverage. Now, you were right that RTO is a huge thing right now. And some of that is reduction in force, a way to cover over layoffs, stuff like that. Another part of it is fear, because I do talk to a number of leaders that reach me because the software we provide, Sukha, a number of engineers and designers and stuff use it. So sometimes engineering managers and team leaders call me to say, hey, 3 of my people use this. Can I get 10 licenses or whatever, right? And when you talk about remote work with them, it's interesting because if you dig down, and they have fear around it, it's usually fear of, well, I can't see what Nick's doing on Tuesday afternoon at 3. How do I know he's not playing with his dog? Like if we're all under the same fluorescent lights 5 days a week, 6 days a week, 10 hours a day, I know what Nick's doing, right? And that, to me, operating from fear is not a great thing. There are some activities that are great to do in person. Like I work remotely, but I'll tell you this, I've never had a creative brainstorm remotely over Zoom or Meet or Teams that was as good as being in the room with someone. You just feel the vibe of like, what should happen next? Or what should the feature be like? There is something to that, right? But there are other things where it's like, I have to go code a feature. I really don't need to be next to you, right? So there are a couple things that come up with that. Number one, as we go forward, I hope that work becomes measured by the effect of what you did, not where or when you did it. So if you are on my team and you say, hey man, I worked for 2 minutes yesterday while I was playing catch with my dog at the beach, I had this idea, and it's the idea that changes our company. I kind of don't care if it took you 2 minutes or you were at the beach or if your dog was there. You changed the company. The effect of what you did was, we're going to win, right? But if I'm fearful, I'm like, well, listen, Nick, if you're not here at 7:00 at night, you're just not working and I just don't know what you're doing. Hey man, there are different issues at play, right? Mm-hmm. And some of those issues come from bad hiring. Because I'll tell you this, if you as a leader, not as a manager who makes sure the reports are filed on time, if you as a leader understand you have 2 really big things to do. You have to declare a mission. We are here to cure cancer. We are here to make great romantic comedies. We're here to, make whatever it is. And you declare a style. This is how we treat each other. This is how we treat our competitors. This is how we treat our customers. And this is our culture. If you do those well, you attract the right people to the organization. Because I'll tell you this, if you come on my team, Nick, and I know we're trying to cure cancer, and you and I have talked about this, and your grandmother died of cancer, Tuesday at 3 p.m., I'm not asking myself whether you're playing catch with your dog. I know you're moving the ball down the field. But if I hire you and you have 5 jobs in the last 7 years and you're spending all your time on LinkedIn jobs, I'm an idiot to hire you. You are not engaged in our mission. You do not care about our culture. And that's a hiring problem.
Well, thank you for sharing your views on that. That's very, very insightful, Stephen, indeed. And I can certainly see that one. And I believe also it's different for different people. Some people are good remotely. Others really need that social connection. I need a social connection as an introverted person. I would be very comfortable at home. But what I do instead is I make sure I join some sport activity with other people every day. So I get the social help from that if I don't have.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So Stephen, thank you so much for having come on the show today. It's been great speaking with you. We have a lot to learn from you, what we can learn from film and TV. Thank you for all the beautiful stories, inspirational stories, Stephen. And
it was super fun.
Yeah, likewise. And if someone want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Easiest way is my email address is very public, which is Steven, Steven at thesukha.co. THESUKHA.co. And if someone's interested in experiencing a flow state, we provide flow state software. It's free for 3 days. You can try it at the Sukha, THESUKHA.co.
Fantastic. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Stephen, for having come on the show. And thanks to all the listeners as well. Have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.